Three, two, one. How's it going, everybody? This is Rob Chen. I am your host on China on the Internet. I know it's been a while, but we have a very, very special guest with us today. We have the one and only Tim Crosbie. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much for having me on.
And so for those who don't know, Tim Crosbie, so you actually are an Academy nominated visual effects supervisor, and he recently worked on a film that was just released this year. And I guess it's safe to say that it's considered the first blockbuster movie in the world during this pandemic time. And it's a movie called The 800. And it's based off a true historical event that took place in Shanghai in October, I believe October 1937. And it's about this 800 Chinese soldiers who were defending their last strongholds in a warehouse called Xihang Warehouse in Shanghai from the Japanese invasion.
我就像太爷上海这模子样。过尽忠为义，让我子孙后代再不受此屈辱。
So I just watched this movie today, and whoa! First, I gotta say, how did you get involved with this project? Because it's a big film. It's like over 2 hours long. There's a lot of action happening, and you came from. I know you worked on X-Men. So how did you go from, say, something on like Western film based then into a Chinese film?
Well, there was an old friend of mine, John Dietz, who has a company in Beijing called Bang Bang Pictures. And he and I had worked together on a few shows in the past. And he'd been contacted by production because he's been in the industry himself for quite a long time. And they basically reached out and said, look, we know we have this huge movie. We're pretty sure it's going to do extremely well. We want to make sure that the visual effects are up to scratch. It needs to be world class. And so John gave me a ring. This was back in November 2016, and said, "Hey Tim, we got this project. It looks pretty cool. There's some really good people on it. Would you mind coming over and supervising on set for maybe about 5 months?" Now that sort of blew out to about 2.5 years. So, which was kind of interesting. I turned up in Beijing in November 2016, and I got to read the script, which was impressive. I then started working with the director, Guan Hu, and we were going through and storyboarding the entire show, just simple sketches mostly, just to kind of give a visual representation for what the script was saying. And after that, the DP came on board, I think in January 2017, and his input was immense as well. Xiaoyu has had, he's been working in the industry for years and years and years, so very experienced and got an amazing eye. As you can probably see, and anybody else who actually goes to see the movie, you will see how good he is as well. And a lot of the time, actually, sorry, backing up a little bit, we were due to start shooting in Suzhou around about February 2017, but as we were recceing the location, or the site where we sort of built this entire setup, and I use the term "we" quite wrongly. It was actually they had built it before I got there.
The production.
Yeah. So we realized that it was going to take longer to build and complete than we had time for the initial shoot start date. So a big decision was made to go on hiatus and kick off the movie in September. We actually started shooting the very first shot on 9 a.m. on the 9th of September, which is obviously a very auspicious number. So anyway, that meant that we had a lot of time to do pre-production and plan everything out to the tiniest degree. so that when we started turning up on set and started shooting, everybody knew what they needed to do. And the production designer, Limu, he is, again, another amazing guy, amazing eye. You've probably seen when you watch the movie, the level of quality and the level of detail that was put in. Because the set build was huge. A lot of movies these days tend to shoot with small sets and then do a lot of visual effects extension. On this one, a lot of what you see in camera is practical with small amount of extension on, except when we go to the aerial shots, when you see the whole of 1937 Shanghai sort of built out to the horizon. And
how big was the whole set? Because
okay.
if that's what you're saying, like they physically built it, like it looks. I mean, you're talking about the whole battlefield right there.
It takes about half an hour to walk around the perimeter. It's
That's huge.
So it was about 1 to 1.5 k's long from north to south, and about 900 meters wide for the river from left to right.
That's
so
insane.
And we ended up putting green screens around most of it as much as we could, although, to be honest, the amount of green screen that I wanted to put up, the production was going, yeah, no, that's way too much. We ended up putting up about 2 kilometers of green screen, 15 meters high. So, and
wow.
as the production would move along, we'd schedule which directions we'd be looking in and then move the green screens appropriately.
That is, I mean, it is an $80 million budget film, so I was like, you know, I could assume that, you know, maybe a few green screens here they could afford that. That is insane. I do have to ask, you know, because there's a certain part that I really, really loved, and it's kind of when I don't want to have too many spoiler alerts, but there's one part where like the little brother envisions kind of like the folklore of one of the Chinese heroes, General Zhao Zilong, from a really old fable called Three Kingdoms. And so I kind of want to ask you, which is, you know, because most people who are not from China, they probably wouldn't know this story, but when I was watching it, it was very visual. Like, did you go through this entire process in terms of like how would you sketch out that scenic view and everything? Like,
that was something that Limu kind of like set up with. He's a production designer. He set up with the art department. They did so many sort of like different concepts, different ways of looking at things. And he worked very closely with Guan Hu. Guan Hu knew exactly what he wanted. My job was to work with them and to fully understand not just the simple visuals, but the feeling that you wanted to get out of it. And so I think we used, there's a company called Rising Sun Pictures in Adelaide, which I'm now currently working with. They spent, probably 2 or 3 months setting up and building that asset and building the entire valley. I obviously don't want to give away too many spoilers, but as everybody knows, I think who's going to be watching this, if you know the story, you know, it's one person against many. And so we shot on a blue screen stage just the gentleman on the horse, as well as just a little bit of the mound that he was kind of standing on, but everything else is all completely digital.
It feels like I'm in a video game, but it's like I'm in some fourth dimension almost, because it feels really magical. And then
that's something we were definitely trying to achieve, because it needed to feel like this was a slightly dreamy quality to it. It couldn't be completely real, but we built it real first and then pushed it into that dreamlike feel, like you see it in the movie.
Absolutely incredible. And kind of what I want to talk about a little bit before was like the attention to detail, as you mentioned, was so specific. Were there certain symbolisms like that you guys talked about? Like, for example, like animals. I know the white horse. I know there's a white horse, but even in the trailer, and I've seen it again when I was watching the movie, like rats too.
Yeah.
it's like
It,
it's very visceral too. Like,
yeah, I think it's something that Guan Hu likes to use. He's very much the allegory of certain animals at certain times. You kind of, it's not every single thing that you see in that movie. It's there for a reason. There is nothing in there that didn't have a reason behind it.
for sure, there was, and even as I was watching it, like I did feel like every single animal, every single element was so important to the film, and I started to pick up on it, whether it's like a piece of paper or a cloth or a camera, it all ended up stacking up, and it made the storytelling that much more powerful. So whatever you guys did 100% worked. That was absolutely incredible. Did you in terms of like the color schemes, because I've kind of noticed that in a lot of certain the battlefield scenes or within the warehouse, you played a lot around with certain colors, and I also wonder, like, was it set on like, okay, we want to have it kind of like a tint greenish color for these scenes and like more brown earthy tones in these other scenes like that? I'm not a visual artist, so I don't really know about that part.
I mean, it's a technique that storytellers using visual arts have used time and time again, but it's something that I think Cao Yu is particularly good at. He kind of blocked out in his mind, where he wanted things to go, how he wanted things to look. But very specifically, when you look at tonality in any movie that's done well, certain colors will, I don't know, bring a certain sense to the viewer when you're watching. When something's blue, there's a level of coldness happening, and you kind of, when something's warm, there's a level of happiness happening. So he was very, very careful in how he blocked everything out.
For sure, and that I saw 100%. I'm curious about your experience, because you went from being there for a few months to over 2 years in China. But you've also, you've worked on a lot of American films as well. What would you say would be like a different? Have you noticed like certain differences or similarities between Western and Eastern like film industry?
Well, there's definitely there's a lot of similarities, because form follows function. You kind of, certain things you just have to do the same way. However, there are definitely some differences with regards to, I don't know, it's hard to put a sort of like a specific thing on this. For instance, different departments that I'm used to working with, like, grips, electrics, camera, art department, those general labels still apply, but how those departments work together and the different positions within those departments is quite different in China than it is in the US.
And how so are they different?
Gosh, it's been a year and a half since.
It's been a year and a half.
I think it's more just how the hierarchy works and who reports to who. It's just different. It's hard to really put a finger on it, actually. It still works, clearly. You see the results. It's I think with regards to how the Chinese industry has grown, because it's grown in and of itself as opposed to interacting necessarily with other sort of societies. It's found different ways of doing things and equally as effective.
Wow. That's one big thing that I've always been interested in, which was like the Chinese like film, the entire market of it. And I remember reading, I watched this TED Talk where somebody was saying that by 2020, China will be the #1 movie box office in the world. And this was like a TED Talk that came out 10 years ago.
Right.
Now that you are somebody who has now officially worked on a Chinese film, would you say like there is definitely a lot of influence as well as a lot of excitement in terms of like where the direction of Chinese film is going to go towards?
I think the market in China is huge. And we've seen over the last, I suppose, 5 or so years, Hollywood has been looking to create content where they can sell in China. and which is proved very successful to greater or lesser degrees. I think with regards to where China's going and how it's progressing, it's kicking off faster, I think, than quite a few people were expecting. The rise has been meteoric. The scope of the movies that are coming out are incredible. They're really good. They're very impressive.
And it's very impressive is like one way to put it for sure. And one of them is just the fact that how much manpower, how much money, how much effort, how much energy gets put into each film. And particularly like a film like The 800, where it was 4 years long of a whole process, and you've been there since pretty much the very beginning of it, all the way till you see the final product of it. 4 years. Also shot completely on IMAX cameras, I believe.
Yeah, it was ARRI 6K cameras that are, basically it's taken quite some time, I think, for camera technology to get up to a level where you can shoot with enough resolution to hold up on IMAX. ARRI brought out their 6Ks just before we kicked off the shoot. And I think we were using the first 6Ks in China. So we beautiful cameras to work with. And ARRI and IMAX have been working together for a while on this to get the technology right. They're a dream to use in post-production, because the workflow for visual effects has a certain amount of, how do I put it? There are certain things you need to have to be able to do the work right. You need to have the electronics, the chip, all of the workflow that exists digitally needs to be mapped out in such a way that you can then recreate it perfectly in the computer. And ARRI had done a fantastic job for doing that.
Dang. Technology at its finest in 2020. That's how we could get that. I mean, from the only thing I know is that, like, from talking to cinematographers, which is some of your best like edits will honestly just come from like what you shoot initially. So then it makes it much easier when you then in post, when you're in the room like looking at the film. And if I do believe that if you're filming on an IMAX camera all the way through, that you will probably have some pretty good images to work with, for lack of better words.
We had some beautiful images to work with. Guanhu and Zou have been working in this industry for so long. They know what they need to get in camera to tell the story. There were very few scenes when we needed multiple takes. Most of the time we get it within about 4 or 5 takes.
That's good.
And the coverage, I mean, what we're talking about is coverage, making sure you actually catch every view that you need to tell the story. And our director, he knew exactly what he wanted to tell the story. Our DP knew exactly what he needed to get into camera to tell the story. And all three of us were sitting next to each other on, in Video Village in the director's tent, making sure that we all had what we needed. I think there was only one instance where I had to go over to the guys and said, I'm sorry, could you shoot that take again, because I didn't get what I needed. The rest of the time, nailed it every time.
That's incredible. And most of the time I usually hear on like film sets, like a lot of times they have to do reshoots of a lot of like different scenes sometimes. So it definitely makes your job a lot easier for sure.
No reshoots on this one.
Amazing. So I have one final question, and which is, do you have any fun stories on working on this film? Or one particular one that's like very memorable?
Oddly enough, I think that the whole thing is just one of the most amazing experiences I think I've had. There were times when director and I and DP and all the rest of it, we'd go out and we'd have a few drinks, but I probably can't tell you some of those stories.
Those are the fun memories. Those are the memories that you make with your colleagues, like when you're on a film set, for sure. Those are always
still keeping in touch. It's they're all off doing other things. Like, I mean, if I call it the dream team, really. Everybody worked together so well. If Tiger can get the rest of the team back together again, I'd love to join in.
Oh, nice. And I know I already said final question, but what's next for you? in terms of projects?
There's a little something that's shooting in New Zealand, which I'm not allowed to talk about, but it's
Fair
quite a
enough.
big
Fair enough.
company.
Okay. Well, I know that you've been on X-Men. I know that you've been on the 800, so I could only assume what this next one would be. And I'm assuming it might be a superhero movie. Maybe, maybe not.
Not a superhero movie, I can tell you that.
Okay.
It's a big scale.
Oh, nice, nice. Ooh, okay. Well, we will be looking forward to that as well. And just a quick pivot for everybody who is listening. The movie 800, they budgeted at $80 million, and when they released it in China, it was only at 50% capacity for the movie theaters, and it already has reached over $200 million in the box office alone. And just this past Friday, they released it in North America for the first time. And so I'm interested to see how well it does in America, because I'm assuming that it is pretty popular in China, but I will be very curious to know how it will be in America. But that being said, we are out of time. But once again, Tim, sir, my fine friend, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure and an honor, and actually very much so an honor, because just seeing the film all together and then seeing the person behind all the visual effects of it, I'm like, that's crazy. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Awesome. Thank you very much for having me, Rob.
All right. And once again, this is China on the Internet. My name is Rob Chen, and I hope to see you guys very soon.